Hey everyone, it's Maia, here to talk to you about the state of the standings for SPL 16 as we head into the mid-season. With 4 weeks behind us, 2 teams have quickly emerged at the front of the pack. The Congregation of the Classiest sit in first place with 3 wins and a tie, while the Alpha Ruiners hold second place with 3 wins and a loss, though it's worth noting the difference in strength of schedule between these 2 teams, with the Classiest having played the bottom 4 teams in the tournament, while the Ruiners have played against 2 weaker teams and 2 stronger teams, so we might expect to see some shifts near the top of the rankings after the mid-season. The middle of the standings is where we're likely to see the most movement, as 4 teams currently sit at 4 points fighting for the 3rd and 4th seed spots to get into the playoffs. The Indie Scooters and Wi-Fi Wolfpack have those spots right now thanks to an even point differential, while the Dragon Spiral Tyrants and Team Raiders are just behind with an overall game record of 23-25 each. All of these teams have some series against each other left in the back half of the season, so we can expect them to pull out all the stops to gain an upper hand. One step down from those teams are the Circus Maximus Tigers, Cryonicles, and Stark Sharks, each with 3 points and 1 win, 1 tie, and 2 losses. These teams can't be counted out yet, but they have some pretty tough schedules to get through if they want to push their way up to the playoff spots. All of them have to play at least 2 teams currently in the top half of the standings in the coming weeks and will be counting on their players to mount a strong comeback. Rounding out our standings going into the mid-season, we have their Evergrande Bigs in last place with 1 win and 3 losses. With only 2 points, the Bigs have by far the hardest road to playoffs, needing to win at least 3 of the next 5 weeks to have a fighting chance. The good news for the Bigs, however, is that they've already gotten several of their toughest opponents out of the way, having fought the Classiest, Ruiners, and Wolfpack already. However, they'll still need several of their slots to start performing significantly better to get to the semifinals. Now moving into the power rankings, it's time to talk about expected performances. The Ruiners have been performing as expected, being tied for first on the power rankings with the Tyrants, who are slightly underperforming as they sit tied for 4th. The Tigers, who are only 1 point behind the Ruiners and Tyrants in the preseason predictions, have been noticeably underperforming, as they're now currently 7th. The Wolfpack and Sharks were tied for 4th place in our predictions, and only the Wolfpack have held to that, currently tied for 3rd, while the Sharks are tied for 8th place, significantly worse than expected. The Classiest and Scooters, however, are both doing much better than projected. The Classiest were projected to be in the middle of the pack and have defied expectations by breaking away into 1st place, while the Scooters were given a poor preseason ranking of 8th, only to be in the top 4 for the first half of the season. The Cryonicles, tied with the Classiest for 6th on the predictions, are the opposite of their power ranking partners, maintaining expectations as they're tied for 8th. The Bigs were ranked 9th and are 10th, so they are performing as expected. Rounding out the rankings are the Team Raiders, who ended up ranked 10th due to last-minute roster shifts impacting the votes for their team. It's hard to say where they would have ended up had this not happened, but tied for 4th is a good spot to be in for a team that has had to adapt so much to unexpected changes. Talking about individual performances, we'll start with SVOU. Eternal Spirit stands out as the only 4-0 player in the tier, despite low preseason expectations for the Brazilian, though the rest of the Raiders' SV core, Yovan, Mimikyu Stardust, and Hiko, are all even or worse. The Classiest have had the best SV season of any team, despite their core of Langlois, LPZ, Sinnoh Confirmed, and Dolly being considered one of the worst in the tour. The first 3 have each gone 3-1, and while Dolly went 0-3 in the first 3 weeks, they were subbed out for Kate, who pulled off the biggest upset of the week against Lax in Week 4 and will be starting again in Week 5, possibly bringing even more success to this set of players. Conversely, the Sharks, who are projected to have the strongest SV in the tournament, have only seen Attribute and Lily live up to expectations, with Nico and JYT Campbell combining for a 1-6 record. JYT was subbed out last week for FC, who was also unable to get a win in the slot. This week, the Sharks will be trying another substitute, unknown quantity Y Addicted, who will need to hit the ground running to get the team back on track. To round off our notable SVOU stats, undisputed top threats in the pool Helom and Lax have been underperforming so far, breaking even each with a 2-2 score, while the Scooters are in a decent position despite the overall middling performance of their SVOU. Having their star player winning at the level we know he's capable of would only be a boon to the team. On the other hand, the Bigs SVOU is 5-11 overall, and Lax's even record is the best of the bunch. They desperately need someone to take the lead here and start bringing in the wins. Several other highly rated SVOU players, Old Spice Mike, My Java, and Clean, are carrying 3-1 records for their teams, while Stormzone and JJ09 Lie are both even for the Tigers. We're seeing underperformance in the top talent from Pice and M. Forbes, who are 1-3 each, as well as ACR1, who is 0-4 despite a 6th place preseason ranking and an $18K price tag. Overperforming are ZS, Ewin, and Fogbound Lake at 3-1 each, all expected to be in the middle of the pack this season, as well as Dugza with the same record, who is ranked in the bottom half of the pool. Also of note is Tyrant's SVOU player VK, a surprise starter who is expected to be subbing with Luis Pico starting instead, and has now gone 3-1 with wins against players like Attribute and Mincemeat. Now getting into our old gen records, we'll start with SSOU, which has been extremely difficult to get a pulse on this SPL. TD&T went 8-1 in the tier last season, and the Sharks were definitely banking on him replicating that success, only for him to go 1-3 and be substituted out for JYT Campbell in Week 5, and Ox the Fox, whose return after a year-long hiatus was met with a lot of hype and high expectations, has also been underperforming. The Tyrants have been similarly struggling, with Metallica 126 sliding out for a 1-3 record, but are hoping to turn it around with top-ranked player Luthier now able to play starting in Week 5. Conversely, sleeper picks Hayburner and Sacred, alongside SPL rookie Crispy Bacon, have been leading this pool with 3-1 records. SMOU is an extremely evenly matched pool, with 7 of the 10 starters in the first 4 weeks going 2-2. Punny and Ima stand out as the 2 positive records in the pool at 3-1 each, while Luigi stands out for a different reason, going 0-4 in the slot for the Tyrants into being subbed out in favor of Metallica 126. While Punny is performing as expected, the Raiders and Big will each look to their highly ranked SM stars and Sky Penguin and Charm Flash to pick up the pace and get some much needed wins for their teams. Gray Oak sits at the top of the Oris OU pool with an undefeated record, though his schedule has been one of the weakest so far, and he'll need to maintain the success going into tougher opponents. Michael Derbest, too, originally meant to be started in SV for the Raiders, has been underperforming in this slot with a 1-3 record. This is a tier that has overall seen a lot of shakeups for the midseason, with 2 0-4 veteran players in Urs and Axel being subbed out for different veteran players in London Beats and Vileman, while the Chronicles especially needing Vileman to rescue the sinking slot and bring them out of the bottom half of the standings. SPL veteran Watashi and Wanai in his sophomore season, who are together described as inconsistent, disappointing, and depressing, are leading the black and white pool alongside Finchinator, who was unsurprisingly projected to do well here after a poor showing in SV last year. Solund is currently 2-2, an underperformance for a player of his caliber who was considered the unanimous best player in this pool, and Dice, the final of the 3 highest black and white players, is in a similar boat. We'll see Just Franco here again for the Bigs after he upset Dice last week, while Elodin is back after flexing into DPP last week for the Sharks, both teams needing this slot to perform well. Malekith has found himself playing black and white for the Tigers after leaving the DPP slot behind, hoping to right the team's 0-3 start. DPP OU is unsurprisingly led off by fan-favorite returning veteran player BKC, and last year's 9-0 DPP starter Void, who is giving the Wolfpack good value out of his 10k retain, while Groudon, ranked at the very bottom of this pool for the preseason, and the combined efforts of Crucify and Elodin for the Sharks round out this slot's positive records. There are very few neutral records here, only Ladybug and Dreju457, with Laurel and We3 King sitting at 1-3, along with the duo of Scooter's DPP players PKEL Sweet For You and SFG, with the 1 win coming from SFG when he subbed in last week, and the Tigers DPP, who saw Malekith sub out at 0-2 for Christos, who's now 1-1 and continuing to start in this slot. ADVOU was the most polarizing tier preseason, and the records represent that. Bad Dummy is undefeated after pulling off the biggest predictions upset of the tournament against McMegan Week 1, with McMegan himself and Pack making up the other 2 positive records. On the other hand, Arctic Breeze, back after a year break from SPL, has fallen short of high preseason expectations from both his play and the support of Bigs manager ABR, going 0-4 in the first half of the season. Scarfrim and Violet River are both performing near the bottom of this pool as expected. Despite all of that, ADVOU has been the tier with the closest margins for expected performance, but Megan was the undisputed number 1 in the pool. but every starter after him had a mixed bag of expectations, and they all seem to be rated differently depending on who you ask, so it's truly anyone's guess as to how this pool will look at the end of the tournament. GSC OU is generally characterized as the boomer pool, and this year is no exception, with only one debutant in Mr. Soup, who is putting up a 2-2 record so far. Conflict and Don Eduardo are leading this pool as expected, while Gorgie and Behe are falling behind, despite the latter's $20K price tag. The rest of the pool is even with each other, and this is pretty much expected and a pattern most people will assume we'll see hold for the rest of the tournament. Finally, where most tiers have most of their players even with each other, half of the RBY pool is 3-1, so it's more notable to talk about who isn't. Prinz, making a long-awaited return to SPL after a 5-year hiatus, is 2-2 in spite of incredibly low expectations for him from the RBY community going in, and Gefeliker Random is 1-3 in spite of very high expectations for him. The Tyrants had veteran player Spies starting for the first 3 weeks to no success, and have instead subbed in Luis Pico, originally slotted to be an SVOU starter, who defeated Prinz last week and will be looking to replicate that success going forward. In a similar boat, the Tigers subbed out Genesis 7 after a 0-3 start in favor of Shiloh, who lost last week and will need to pull it together to help his struggling team going forward. To round out our mid-season recap, we'll talk about the predictions contest. As you're probably aware, we've been running a predictions contest all season long with a $450 grand prize, gathering predictions from the community on each matchup every week. If you're following along, you may have noticed a picture of a Primeape labeled the Ape on our spreadsheet, representing a truly even 50-50 predictions record, and, as many people in the community are coming to find out, beating the Ape is extremely difficult. As of week 4, Oris OU is the tier at the highest rate of correct predictions at 65%, with ADVOU not far behind at 63.16%. ADVOU is also notable for the majority of predictors picking the correct choice 10 out of 10 times in weeks 2 and 3, with no other tier seeing a perfect predict rate in any week. Conversely, DPP OU and SSOU have proven to be the hardest to predict at 40% and 42.11% respectively. SVOU has seen the most fluctuation, with the correct prediction rate ranging anywhere from 30% in week 2 to 65% in week 4. As of week 4, the community as a whole sets at an overall predictions rate of 53.39%, just slightly positive after a good showing last week. The biggest upsets of the tournament, unsurprisingly, belong to the players who were ranked the unanimous number 1s in their pool. 2 of these belong to Sky Penguin, who lost to Rob Jr. in week 1 and Comp in week 3, despite being predicted to win about 89% of the time over both of these opponents. When I defeated Soulwind in week 2 despite the latter having a 91% predicted win against him, and the biggest upset of the early tournament took place in week 1 when Badummy defeated McMegan despite only 6% of participants predicting that he would. Soulwind also carries 2 of the least surprising victories by predictions in this tournament, defeating Misum in week 1 and Gary the Ganger in week 4 with an average of 87% of predictions between the two saying he would. BKC and McMegan also have the highest predicted wins, BKC over Laurel in week 2 and McMegan over Violet River in week 3. So that's where every team is situated heading into the last 5 weeks of SPL 16. No one is truly out at this point, and anything can happen between now and the semifinals, so keep an eye on the standings and cheer on your favorite teams and players. Remember that you can catch us live at twitch.tv/SmogonU every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for live coverage, and subscribe to the channel to see highlights and in-depth analyses of games we didn't get on stream.